gleich erklären. Verlust der Nacht, einen herzlichen Applaus für Christopher Kyba. Das ist einfacher. Okay, so ich mag es auf Englisch, weil sonst komme ich nie durch in 10 Minuten. So I'm a physicist again, sorry about that, and I study light pollution. So classically, that's when you can't see the stars inside of the city because it's too bright. And so why should anybody care about light pollution? And I have one very good reason, and that is that light pollution can kill you. Note there's some fine print there, though. If you're a hamster. Now, if you really love hamsters, now's probably a good time to get a beer and maybe go outside. Just skip the rest of this talk. Hamsters are going to be shorthand for sort of small mammals throughout the rest of the talk. But before we start, what's the world like at night? Well, it's dark. At least it used to be until we had electric lights. And now it looks like this. And you can see why this is a topic for Nachhaltigkeit, or sustainability, because it takes a lot of energy to produce all this light. And if we're worried about carbon dioxide and we would like to reduce the amount of energy we use, well, there's one easy option to make this better. Just turn it all off. So who here would prefer to go home in the dark tonight? A couple. And who would prefer it that the street will be lit and you'll find your way home? That's it? Honestly? Personally, I really think the streets should be lit. Okay, most of you at least thought so. I think so. So I'm sure the question that everyone's asking now is, what does God think about that? Obvious question, and we know the answer. Let there be light. And God saw there was light, and he saw that the light was good. Light is good. We should have more light, maybe even. Like cotton candy. Cotton candy is good. And bacon. Bacon. And Christmas, Stollen and Weihnachtsmarkt, it's great, it's so good, but look what happens to poor Homer. Things that our ancestors thought were good are not necessarily good for us anymore in times when we can have them in almost unlimited quantities. So we have to ask ourselves, is it possible to have too much light? Well, we can do this with animal experiments, where we look at what happens when you change the light environment. So on this side, the animals are exposed, the hamsters are exposed to light during the daytime, and they get darkness at nighttime, normal life. And on this side, they get light during the daytime and then dim light at nighttime, and we see what happens. So first experiment, look at their weight. It turns out that if you do this with hamsters, they end up getting fat under the light at night. And the reason is because they shift the timing at which they eat, and that affects their metabolism. And therefore, they don't metabolize the food as well. And so this, of course, has huge implications for humans, and this was just recently discovered. So I think we'll hear more about this in future years. Next experiment, light and mood. Probably you know some people who are really affected with the changing of seasons. It has to do with the light. When they expose the hamsters to light at night, and they look at their physiology, they see changes that are consistent with depression. And so that makes them think that exposing yourself to light at night could potentially also affect human beings and depression, things like that. Next experiment is slightly different. They look at the pregnancy success for hamsters in different conditions. This one is having natural light and dark. This one simulates once a week a flight to New York, 6 hours delay on the clock. And these ones get 6 hours advance, flying to Beijing. So what happens with the pregnancies? Well, with the natural situation, 90% of them are successful. So you have happy hamster mummies, happy hamster babies, everything's great. When you fly to North America, it suddenly is much worse. Half of the pregnancies don't work out. And you may have noticed at some point when you fly back to Europe, it's much harder. And then in that case, only 20% of the pregnancies work out. So what about this death thing that I mentioned at the start? Well, there was a problem in Israel that the hamsters were eating all of the alfalfa crops, and they didn't want to spray poison on them. So they thought, let's see what we could do instead. Maybe we can trick them into thinking that it's summer, because they breed when the seasons change, and then maybe they won't have so many babies. So they tried the experiment. They're setting a street light up now out in an actual field. The ones under the moon and the stars have lots of babies, just like always. The ones under the lamp, we saw, well, maybe the pregnancies don't work out so well. Actually, they just all died. And they thought, well, that's strange. Let's try that again. Only this time, we'll put the light on only 15 minutes every 4 hours. And the result was exactly the same. So they went back to the lab to try and work it out. And what it turns out is that their body was completely fooled by the light. They could sense the temperature outside, just like you or I could, but their brain thought it was summertime. And so they didn't conserve the energy they needed to live through the winter, even though in the exact same temperature situation, they could have had lots of babies. So we can see that for small mammals, light has a big effect. But of course, we're people, so what do we worry about? Well, you know the song. The whole point for why they're looking at hamsters in these experiments is because they are mammals, and they are like us. The physiology is a little different, but we're trying to understand human physiology. And we know that shift workers, for example, are far more likely to get cancers like breast cancer and prostate cancer. And there's a way to explain through the hormone levels in your body related to light at nighttime why that might be the case. So it's a good candidate. So let's come back to, what does God think about all of this now? We have the Südstern church all lit up. We can no longer see the entire universe that God created. So what does he think about this? Well, we've got to go back and read the rest of Genesis. God separated the light from the darkness, and a day consists of light, of daytime, and of nighttime. And when we change the world to get rid of the nighttime, we're sort of playing God, and that can have problems occasionally. So we come back to this now. I think you can argue that this is the single greatest change that human beings have made to the planet's environment. And we should probably do something about it, because this eats up a huge amount of energy, and we're having all of these other effects that aren't direct economic effects, but are probably nevertheless having a big economic cost. So what can a city do? Well, put the light where it's needed. Put it on the street. Don't shine it in people's bedroom windows, and don't shine it into the sky, because that makes no sense at all. It just costs money. So you can see when the city changes it, suddenly all of the trees get very dark for the birds and the squirrels and animals that live there. And what could you do personally to improve things? Well, you could join the International Dark Sky Association. It's an environmental organization for the nighttime. And they work with industry to try and teach industry and municipalities how you can light your city more effectively. You can talk to your political representatives because they'll respond. Let them know that you think it's crazy that we're shining light into bedroom windows or up in the sky. And think about your own exposure to light and day and night. You're evolved to have bright light at day and darkness at night. And if you stay inside all day, you don't get that. So go outside during the day, try and get some sunlight. And in the evening before you go to bed, maybe put down the iPad and try and do something that's a little bit less bright. Especially bright blue light really affects your body more than you think. So okay, all that stuff was about biology and about city planning, but I'm a physicist, so what in the world do I actually do? Well, we fly over Berlin taking photographs, and we measure where the light is coming from, so we can understand where to solve the problem. So for example, Tegel Airport accounts for about 3% of all of the light from Berlin. So you learn that by looking at a few individual sources, you could make a big difference. We also look from the ground up at the sky. So I actually published a paper recently called Red is the New Black. I was happy that got through. And it refers to the fact that in nature, clouds make the sky darker. They make it black. But inside of the city, they light it up very brightly. And so we measure this quantitatively and look at what that is. And what the goal of all of this is, what I want to do in the next couple years, is make a simulation of the whole world, the situation under clear skies and cloudy skies, to be able to tell the ecologists, look, here's Naturpark Westhaveland under 2 different scenarios about Berlin. And then with this information, they'll be able to find areas that are not yet affected by light pollution to do experiments, and they can do controlled experiments. Once we really understand what the real situation is, they can do control experiments on what effect the light is having. So if you think this is a good idea, let me know. Okay, thanks. The way that funding works, though, they send out this proposal to people and they decide whether it's a good idea. But that agency is in Bonn. So if you want them to hear it, make it a little bit, let them know all the way in Bonn that they should fund this one. All right. Okay, to finish up, I just want to say, it's really the case that drastically reducing this problem, almost solving it, is just not shining light upward, instead shining it always downward where the light is needed. We save a huge amount of money and energy, and all of our forest friends that we love are happier. Thank you very much. Particularly to my sister-in-law who's here today and drew all of the hamsters. Thank you.
Christopher Kyba, der übrigens schon den Regionalwettbewerb Ost gewonnen hat.